Actually, we're
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We're live just about. Sorry, I can't give you in, but you'll browser. You'll be able to see this. At the same time.
Maybe not a snowball, but.
I think that was our talking about was our stuff.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
No, nobody's ever.
Now, whether those two are,
That's a bad thing.
well, no, but whether that's, we don't know, but it's kind of an interesting phenomenon.
Well, it has a lot. There's another interesting fact is we have a business communication class that is taught primarily by lecturers. And the lecturers, thanks to Poet and ALS, have come together and produced their own source. Which is great for this. And now they have
Oh, so I thought it was a two, I was all organic. Oh, okay. So organic, but it-
not just cost.
Did
You see the open
What? Oh, yeah.
well, they're smart, right? They really,
Yeah, we kind of. Just refi, yeah, I'm kidding. I know I should be lately, or I should make money on the, I should sell my house.
Yes,
And this all be buy something nice. I'm a little ways until I'm like, I know. Very nice to
well,
meet
that's
you. A dog versus a down.
yeah, I don't know what you're doing.
Not very much. While I was in Boston, and I was like, yeah. Well, I actually texted Barbara. I actually texted Barbara. I said, if you have any.
All along.
Yeah,
All right, links are live.
oh, we have one viewer. Did we lose Val?
Yeah, she just had to run to see if DS 106 would come in.
Oh, yeah.
To see if Dr. Jones, this is DJ name. This is Jason.
Actually, we're live here too. So.
That's why they canceled.
full.
I'm gonna see if I can find those.
It's really
We share with Sarah. We get it. We have one of the sessions. We've done a few classes. Yeah.
Like, is it like attached? Could you pull out and put those some chairs down here?
Started out traditional. More specialization.
Oh, like stealing the money.
Science topics.
Yeah. I didn't miss my where percent.
Oh, it should be okay. It's not perfect.
That's why I'm at the first row. I take a photo of the screen, tweet it out. Sound test. Sound test from here. Can you hear me in the back? No. Okay. Didn't think so.
Yeah. I'm stuck at the podium, I guess.
We can look at this. It's just that we don't have it.
Turn it to the.
I'm so old fashioned, I still read TIE as theater and education.
Ah.
Maybe try that today, see how it goes.
Julia Saxon used to be the drama prof in UVic years and years ago.
We'll do improv in education today.
Yeah. Oh, that every day is improv in education.
To 7.
We're a Mulder, and Mulder has a random function.
I'll just look when you start talking to see how much it means.
Bring it closer so it's-
No, we do rap. That's quite next year.
I don't know how the audio is going to be up there, but I'm doing a stream on DS106 radio. So Google and find that link, or maybe we'll get it tweeted out and you can get better audio that way.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to introduce our speakers and then I'm going to get off the stage for you. This afternoon, we have the role of multi-access learning in mainstreaming open education. And we have Valeria Irvine, Tatiana Little, Rich McHugh, and Michael Pascovich. I said I was going to get it right, and I didn't. Sorry. I will leave it.
Great, thank you very much. We're just going to try and figure out the logistics for trying to have a panel on a podium. So I'm doing the best that we can here. So thank you very much. We're from different institutions, I think. Well, Rich and I are both from UVic. Mike's from VIU, and Tanya, who's online, will be joining us. She's from TRU. So we're all part of the TI Lab at UVic, and would like to talk about some of the ways we can look at getting more open education out of higher education. So this is the role of multi-access learning, a model I came up with in 2009, 8 sort of thing. But it's the idea of looking at how we built our systems, and most of the systems that we have that are the brick and mortar mainstream, it's all about that center core of the face-to-face class. So looking at expanding from that, there's a lot of work now on merging modes. So the blend sync group and others that Michael will talk about, that brings in the synchronous tier, and then looking at ways, how do we look at the asynchronous, and finally getting open education into the mix. So we have a Google Doc for sharing. If you want to put in comments and things, we'll look at it later, or you can interact that way. And I believe this was tweeted out. Yes, awesome. And then we also have a Google Hangouts video room. So there's a number of people watching the slides and picking up the audio. We have DS106 radio stream going on. So people outside can participate as well. So, and again, feel free to converse on the OpenEd15 hashtag. So we're from, it's not theater and education, where Mike was saying. Technology Integration and Evaluation Research Lab. I hate the title, but we had to use those words for a hard science Canada Foundation for Innovation grant, and we couldn't use the words teaching, learning, or education anywhere in the grant. So that's why we had to name it that way. But this is photo of a room we built ages ago and systems put in the boardrooms, but we got a classroom in the mix, and basically it was a Google 20% time. I'm in a predominantly brick and mortar institution that is predominantly face-to-face oriented. And so how do we get that culture moving? It's been a big drive, but it's been a really great experience for opening my mind and challenging, how we do things and figuring out hacks to how we change. So that's basically what I talked about a little bit, the overview to what multi-access is. It is about making the modality not that important anymore. History came from when I moved to the University of Alberta from Vancouver. I grew up here, I lived on the North Shore, and I moved to Edmonton for 3 years. In the first term I went to Edmonton, I found myself taking 3 online courses. And I realized, well, why did I move all the way over here? For courses were online, so I wasn't happy with the modality. And then I moved back and got a tenure track job at UVic. And then I really wanted to have really awesome graduate students, but they didn't want to come to Victoria because they were housed wherever they were and had their jobs and families. And then I realized Victoria's a small market. I'd rather have them as online grad students, but I was stuck in a face-to-face modality. So modality dictation is not good. It restricts us too much. And same thing with the closed and open kind of categories. So I was looking at this problem going, I don't like the forced boxing. We brought in blended, and there's all the hype about blended. And I tweeted a couple of years ago that blended is a dead term. I don't think that's the case right now, but I think it will be one day when we finally get to realizing the merging modalities. And it is starting in Australia and Michigan and here and beyond. But once we get to forgetting about that kind of categorization, we can start getting to communities. So multi-access is about just merging that experience the best that we can. Again, this is something I brought up. It's a terrible proceeding. I was doing a big $1 million grant, and I noticed that I could have a trip to Hawaii for a conference. So I crammed out a proceeding in that time frame. But it's the first sort of stake in the ground where I started looking at how do we transfer the locus of control of course access to the learner, not have it be so teacher-centric. And looking at the impact of what it does. When I put out a multi-access cohort for 25 spots, I only gave a 2-week notice, and I had about 300 people try to apply. And so I had ended up having 100 get through with a 75% rejection rate. So anyone that looks at we're declining enrollment needs to think about get rid of the boxing of modality, and then you will have great enrollment. Beyond that, though, course communities are better when you bring in diversity, and diversity comes from all the open learners and open participants and open mentors that come in from that. But once you get rid of those categorization boxes, it's green lights all the way through. So I went to UBC, so I'm going to pick on my alma mater instead of my own university. When we look at things like, okay, I want to do a program at a university, graduate, undergraduate, international is listed there. But so if I want to take an undergraduate program, and I see on the right there's online and distance education, which do I click on? This is called a double-barreled item. Like, where do I click? I don't know. I want them both. So this kind of confusion, this kind of categorization is problematic. And in my Star Trek future dreaming world, we would have the courses that we offer, and each course having that kind of multi-access tiering. Here's where you go to be face-to-face. Here's where you go to be synchronous online. This course has an asynchronous space here, and here's where open participants can join in, and have that kind of a column of how to engage and interact with each course community, not this kind of segmented piece. We have a paper in the JOLT, Realigning Higher Education for the 21st Century Learner Through Multi-Access Learning, and it was a pilot where we actually had retired principals put through a core course on leadership right before a practicum, and everyone was quite happy with a mix of the modes and bringing it together. So some great comments there if you want to check it out.
So in reading that paper that's just been spoke of, one thing that got me really thinking about how this modality flexibility might be extended to open learners was the idea that we've been sort of so focused on designing MOOCs, and institutional strategy has been focused on looking at MOOCs as an alternative or as a source of innovation, whereas I think we're, with multi-access, missing perhaps a small opportunity, perhaps a very large opportunity, to open up further access to learning opportunities and more learners into learning spaces. Certainly we haven't got this all figured out. We actually have this presentation as a way to get sort of the issues out and have a discussion with you about what the issues could be. We're going to go through a number of those as well. And also Audrey Waters, in her Monsters of Education Technology book, alludes to this as well, that our innovation is starting to look just like the LMS, which is sort of not, in my view, a real innovation in 2015. So we need to really think about how open is actualized with emerging technologies which are already available to us now. There are research centers looking into this problem. How do we mix face-to-face, so a group like this, and invite open learners to experience this environment at the same time? We're doing that right now with Hangouts, but there's various models and methods and issues, as you can imagine, that come from this. So this one is down in Australia, and they call this model blend sync. So there's a couple different ways of describing this flexibility. So definitely a good research center to look for some case studies and some user feedback from how this plays out from both faculty and students. Michigan State also has a research lab looking at this problem as well, and have gone into looking at designs of multi-access, which we think are useful. And then the Tech Thai Lab here are with us at UVic. And there was just a conference recently that started to look at multi-access and flexibility, flexible models. So this comes from Michigan State, and this is sort of fleshing out the different topologies or configurations for multi-access. We're using one here where we're bringing in any number of people through Hangouts, so it's sort of a one-to-many relationship. Folks in that environment don't have, there's not much they can do there, but they can access our environment, access our discourse, and perhaps contribute to the conversation. Generally, these configurations are sort of tethered to the room, or can be expensive in some cases as well. The model I really like is this idea of a personal portal, and I don't know if you've ever brought someone in to a meeting via Skype. Actually, any number of us could bring in someone back from our home institution through the devices we have in our hands, and there's technologies that are emerging, like Periscope and Meerkat and such, that enable this quite easily. And the last one is this sort of a notion of autonomous telepresence. And here we're looking at the use of robotics to bring people into rooms and allowing them to move around and interact with some of their own will. And also, I think there's a space for virtual reality here, where in the future we'll be able to be using virtual reality to offer more telepresence into these environments. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya, because you're probably wondering, what do the faculty think of this? And I think she's got some feedback for us on that very thing. So.
Hi, can you guys all hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So I can't actually watch the streaming on Google Hangouts and be on BlueJeans, so I'm going to trust you guys move to the next slide when I say next slide, because of the delay on Google Hangouts. The timing's too hard to do both. Hi everyone. I'm going to be going over some topics and information that arose from interviews we conducted with 7 multi-access instructors. Multi-access classrooms, if you don't already know the definition, are those classrooms that have students attending simultaneously, both by face-to-face access and via online access. So we interviewed 3 tenured professors who taught grad classes, and also 4 sessional instructors who were retired school principals teaching an undergrad education course. Ethics approval was received for the study, and we're using the information from this study in this presentation as open access questions were part of the larger interview. So the first slide is one of the questions that we asked. It was, would you be open to having non-registered open online students audit a multi-access course with or without additional instructor marking? Next slide. On this slide, there's a graph that indicates the breakdown in responses. 4 were yes, which interestingly enough were the responses from the sessional instructors. 1 full-time professor said no, and 2 said maybe. Many suppositions could be made from the breakdown as to what influenced the answers. Potential influences could be that sessional instructors are open to trying more educational strategies as they are still trying to secure a full-time job. However, the sessionals, as I mentioned earlier, interviewed in this study, were retired principals, which also negates the possibility that the sessionals were younger and therefore more apt to be comfortable with technology. So really more research, it would be interesting to do in this area to know exactly why the sessionals responded yes to open and why the full-time instructors responded maybe or no to opening their courses. Let's move on to the overall themes that emerged from the answers to the study. So that'll be the next slide. And the themes that emerged from the study were workload, student engagement, quality of learning, technology and user interface limits, privacy, and the culture of openness. Next slide. Some of the comments from the interviewees on workload. 1 commented, it wouldn't be difficult at all if we had the physical structures to allow it, the physical and the technological structures to allow it. This brings up the question of support needed to open courses. Strictly online courses seem more designed to being able to open access. However, in a face-to-face classroom, how do you provide access and how do you regulate how many access the class live online? For that matter, do you regulate the live online access? Is that, kind of leading into a social justice issue if you say some people can and some people can't? Would open access change the quality of learning for the students actually enrolled in the course? Which is a good segue to the next slide on student engagement. This is a quote from one of the sessional instructors. What happens if you run into potentially some protocol problems? Are we allowing them, open access students, to participate? If so, how much? These are the questions I would ask. Some people are so keen they want to talk. Thank you, but really, you're not my focus. Everybody else here is. And then the instructor says, I guess I can always mute them out, but that kind of defeats the purpose. And the same instructor goes on to say, that means philosophically, I don't have a problem with it, given some of the protocol to make sure it works and privacy issues are addressed, and they, the open access students, can't overtake my class. This quote does exemplify the very real concern of if you open your class to an unknown number of students, do you allow them access to speak, and how do you regulate the discussion so that the registered students don't get lost in that mix? Next slide. A quote from one of the full-time professors touched on the importance of building a relationship with the students. The relationship that we all try to build with our students that supports an optimal learning environment. The professor said, for me, teaching's relational, and I try to build a relationship with every student that's in the class. And if I've got 15 to 25 students that are registered and paying for it, and the other 5 to 10 are kind of dipping in or out, or whatever, I don't know. This quote expresses the concern of what happens to the quality of learning when the learners group becomes increasingly larger. One of the responses in the study touched on the topic of increasing numbers in a learning environment. Next slide. The sessional instructor said, because the more perspectives we have in a learning situation, I think the richer the learning environment becomes. So I think having people who aren't necessarily 5th year education students, or for that matter, really, students that are advanced and already engaged in the learning, adds to the quality of the discussion of the topic and to the learning environment. Another aspect that is vital to the success or failure of opening a course is, next slide, the tech and user interface limits, which I'm sure many of us that use technology in our classrooms now can relate to. The comment from the instructor was that I think you would want to make sure that it isn't taxing the limits of the system, whether it's the screen presence. I think that right now is something, referring to the screen presence, that limits the access already. So having someone else come online, which is, inferring that just additional people accessing via screen would be something that might be hard to navigate. This instructor mentions the importance of the technology needed to support open learning. As we all know, it's not just the technology, but the tech support that we have at our institutions that can make or break a course. However, it has been shown that with today's technology and with proper tech support, open courses do work and are growing in popularity. So perhaps the most significant topic to discuss is the culture itself of open education. Next slide. The culture of openness. One instructor stated, "I'm pretty open about what I do. I don't feel any need to protect what I'm doing. I don't feel any need to be proprietary about what I'm doing. Teaching is a game where you want to share, and if it helps to share, I'm comfortable with that." So investigating the culture of open education and exactly how we as instructors are going to navigate open education and our traditional, because a lot of us really don't want to lose a lot of the traditional values that are associated with, maybe what's considered more old school education. So we really need to do more research in this area and increase our understanding and how to guide open education in today's education and hopefully end up with the optimal learning for everyone. So to help us understand open education more, we have some case studies, and I think Valerie is going to discuss the case studies with you. So that's my bit then.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of tapping into sort of many newbie reactions. These are instructors that have been in K-12, for example, for years, near the end of their career, they're giving service to the university. First introduction, first knee-jerk reactions to how could I move into this space? The reason why we're asking them these kinds of questions is because if you think about where and how open is coming into post-secondary, we have like the standalone type of massive open online course or open course. I don't like the massive part. It's the often separate from credit, is often an additional separate from what we do. So I'm a tenured faculty member. I have my course load. It's 4 courses a year right now. We just went down from 5, so I'm quite thrilled. I'll have a little more balance, maybe get a little more exercise in, some more sleep perhaps. Am I going to go and want to add on to my course load to teach an open course as a separate standalone thing and go back up to 5? No, because I'm already loaded. I have a full load. And this is the case in what's happening in most institutions. So who is teaching the standalone open only kind of course? And this is the piece I'm trying to point to, and why we were looking at multi-access to extend to open is trying to take the existing work that we're doing at universities and get our instructional staff to consider how can they onion layer and extend out to create different kind of open experiences, open discussions. We're focused on sharing open resources, things they build, but how do we look at the various different ways that they can expand out what they do? Because then we really get mainstream access. The other thing that we have, I'm gonna give Brian Jackson my sort of heads up here. I love the work that he does. He's a grade 12 high school teacher in Coquitlam, just across the way. Here in Greater Vancouver. So it's a credit course, right, for grade 12 students, but he gives editor access to his blog and allows, the 2,000 people around the world who want to learn guitar too to record themselves and show their learning and post it on their course blog. So this is another way that people actually expand into it, but it's in an asynchronous way. It's I'm creating my space, but my face-to-face action's over here. And then I'll let you engage in, but I'm going to approve what you do, and everything is in an asynchronous kind of way where we can merge together. And it's great, but it's just I'm showing the different kind of approaches. The standalone open, they will let our credit and open people merge in an asynchronous, safely approved manner. Or, this isn't working anymore, we do things like live stream out. So this is a course at UVic, Technology and Society 400. I did some Thai talks before, and they're kind of doing the same kind of thing with their course where they'll do a live stream out of a lecture in this large class. So it's just this one way out. We'll have a Twitter hashtag, and here's a live stream, pick up the lectures. It's not a highly deep interactive kind of way to connect, but at least we are getting more and more courses doing this one-way synchronous piece. So I look around and I don't see too many things fall into any other categories, but feel free to bring it up. How do we look at that course community and expanding what we do on an individual course by course piece? So our next steps are for how do we look at live, authentic interaction? How do we take some of those iterative steps towards more open participation? I think this is your section, isn't it?
So first we'll look at some tools to help enable, multi-access tools to enable open. And one way to look at the tools is to look at the control that the learner has. And on the left you have tools like Blackboard, BlueJeans, Adobe Connect, where the learner has very little control. They can dial in, they can watch what's being presented. There may be some elements of feedback, but the control really is with the instructor. You've got a bit of a middle ground with some free tools, and then you have the far right with the video conference robots, which gives the learners quite a bit of autonomy and quite a bit of control. So all of these products represent a wide range of cost, support models, and modality. And typically the Blackboard, the BlueJeans have quite a bit of institutional support. Typically as well, the video conference robots, in order to get them into your school, usually you're going to be working with network systems and other people to get them in, so you'll have support through them as well as the vendor. And then on the far right, you have the ad hoc tools, the Google Hangouts, which we're using here today, Periscope, Meerkat, which you're typically not going to have institutional support for. And as a consequence, it's going to be the keener instructors, the ones that are a bit more tech savvy, who are going to be testing and using those tools, but without the support, and depending on the institution, may or may not have the blessing of the institution as well. And really, if we stick with those ad hoc tools, we're not going to be able to roll out these multi-access tools because professors just aren't comfortable doing it on their own. Even with supported tools, if they don't feel like they have enough support, they'll be hesitant to use them for fear of being stuck with egg on their face. So what are some of the other trade-offs when you're looking at the paid products compared to the free ones? Well, for example, Blackboard Collaborate supports up to 400 seeds. Actually, I think it can go up to 1,000, but you need to call them ahead of time to make sure that the stars are in alignment for that board. Google Hangouts supports tens of thousands of concurrent connections. On the other hand, Blackboard does allow for breakout rooms, which could be quite useful pedagogically to have a bit of a lecture format and then have breakout rooms. Whereas you could maybe get a larger crowd with Google Hangouts, but doing a breakout room type setup would be a lot more work for the instructor or for the organization running the course. And that leads to a bit of a talk about tools for discussions. It's, for a lot of instructors, at least in the education department, it's a favorite pedagogical tool to do parent shares. And with the inexpensive ad hoc systems, it's just not easy to do. So if you do use Google Hangouts, for the open audience anyways, you are quite limited in the tools you can use to do real-time discussions. You can always do asynchronous discussions with bulletin boards, which I think is typically done with MOOCs. But if you want to do real-time video synchronous discussions, you're going to need to use a tool like Blackboard Connect, for example. And back to Valerie.
How many of you hate tech tools? Raise your hand.
Right? If you don't, then I think you need to question a little bit more about how they're designed for what it is that you want to do. Most people, I'm surprised David Kieranhout's the only one who raised his hand there. It's one of the things that we look at, and we are forced to live in the box of the designs in which many of these corporations and tools give us. And the limitations can be huge because they impact, our pedagogy, our community, the way that people can interact, the privacy needs that we have to have. So even when we look at, for example, we're using BlueJeans quite a bit in a lot of our teaching. So how do we look at these kinds of things and stop and go, how do we iterate? How do we look at giving impact, or look at changing and creating designs of our own? So the layering of this, and this is the next step recommendation I believe we need to have, is the next step for layering in and bringing open in. So ways to import and bring in hashtags, for example, or Twitter discussions, if that's a back channel. Ways for people to choose, because when you log in, there's a share my video, I'm ready, share my audio, I'm ready. I think we need to look at tools and designs that we can look at next steps. Share with whom? Share with just my registered class, shared with the open world. That kind of thing is, I think, a critical next step for us to look at bringing in open participation into a class and respecting privacy for the class communities that we have. And I'll put the challenge out there to anyone developing software or looking at ways we can do this. This is what we need, not a separate Coursera space where people can look at, where we can create a separate online piece, but how do we look at every single course that we offer, and there's thousands at each institution, how do we look at bringing that kind of layering in to the courses and the experiences that we have? We found one of the frustrations when we looked at just merging modalities between synchronous, online, and the face-to-face students in our classes. Little things like someone wants to be online one week and then on campus the next. We may have certain seats available on campus and certain ports restricted online, and it may be restricted due to the tool, or it may be due to pedagogically what we want to have as our cap. So Rich has sort of helped, we created a team to develop seat exchanger. So students then from a week-to-week basis can trade their seats and give up their seats. So this kind of thing could also look at having open participation in as well. Which events do we want to bring in open participation? Which events do we want to sort of keep it to the registered only, or what have you? So this is one of the things that we look at, iterating how we have our different tools. So we want to have a discussion time now with people around, and challenges and questions and criticisms. So we have these things shared out on the OpenEd15 tag if you want to look at entering your pieces in there. But this is our next step as a discussion. I know we have turnover time for our different, we're going for a full hour, not a half an hour. But the questions we have is, who will teach open? Will professors add a course to their teaching load? Potentiality to increase diversity by making courses layered into open, and allowing more personalization will diffuse risk of appeals, for example, for sameness, that everyone needs to have the same one. And access to discourse rather than just resources used during the course of education. So let's wait for everyone to do their transition for the 2:45 slot. Thank you. And then we'll use the second half for us to have open discussion. So if you do have access to Google Docs, let's participate in there, and then we'll have open conversation. The questions are in the Google Doc. Yeah. So can I have some comments from the group for some of those questions? How do you see open being pursued by the stakeholders in your campus? Is it separate? Is it part of the mainstream? What's the open culture like for you? And if I could hear from folks, that would be lovely.
I can comment a little bit. I'm from the community college, and so usually we don't start with the ambition to create things for everybody else. We're more focused on kind of our own immediate problems, and often in relation to open, affordability is the first hook, right? So I've worked with instructors who started with that, right? They look for open resources that apply to their own courses, but I'm thinking of a few, then they get to the point where they see that open can really change the way that they teach, that the flexibility of the resources can change their pedagogy. And then I've gotten a few, just a small few out of probably over 100 instructors that I've worked with over some of the years that get to that point where they say, and I can impact folks outside of my classroom around the world. I remember just simple things like creating, an instructor was creating basic literacy videos, short YouTube videos, and she had students from different countries, underserved countries, folks without a lot of resources from countries watching her videos and making comments in kind of broken English that were encouraging and talking about how it had really made an impact in their lives. But it's only been a tiny slice of the instructors that I've worked with.
So, but a question I have now too is, when an instructor, I'm from a faculty of education, so usually the instructors in a faculty of education have an education background. The rest of the faculties, they may not have an educational background to begin with, right? So it's like when we provide a room, this layout here, having a podium like this, right? We're pushing against this on how do we do our learning design. So when we present that to new faculty coming in, it's sending a message, this is how you teach. This is the layout, it's going to be hierarchical. Similarly, when they approach technology mediated tools, it's usually going to a central learning systems, and then it's usually a closed oriented box. So how do we look at when they show up and knock on the door, and I guess I need to make an LMS. So how do we look at changing what we do so when they show up, that we look at different ways that we just go more to open with every course that we do. So it's not the 3 out of hundreds. Thoughts on that? What are some initiatives that you may have?
Well, we're in the fortunate position at UBC in that we also support open platforms as part of our ecosystem. So we have WordPress and we have MediaWiki as well. So faculty
and I love what you do there.
Faculty members do have some choice. But even at that, what we're finding in terms of uptake in terms of using WordPress, for example, as a way of organizing a course, most faculty will use it as an adjunct to their LMS environment. We do have some who run the whole course through WordPress. So we see a lot more faculty engagement in open practices, which we really like to see and like to promote because it's a way in. So they may have an assignment on either our installation of UBC Wiki or even MediaWiki or Wikipedia. We have people using blogs, student blogs for different ways of, for different kinds of projects associated with the course. So that's a way into open practice without making the entire course.
And how do the open learners find on the course-by-course basis? Is there?
It's mixed reviews, honestly. Yeah. For some, they've had very good reviews from learners, and for others, it's been an issue in terms of the student, the instructors, and course evaluation.
Got a few questions at the bottom of the document if you scroll down.
Okay. How many people do we have online? Oops.
Can I just, I know open platforms are a way in, but I'm starting to believe that the notion of multi-access is also a way in. Most faculty that I speak to, if you said there's a student who can't get to campus because of a physical barrier, or an emotional barrier. Can we make this possible? They say, yeah, that makes sense. They're maybe not ready to do it tomorrow. There's some literacies there that need to come, but I think the belief is there that it is a social justice issue and it makes sense. And I think if we can just inch them a little closer to opening up to that, we can actually move towards open as well, because it's really then just a, dare I say, scale issue, that we can add one user that's external, you can add 100 potentially. Of course, facilitation becomes an issue.
And I'm sorry, I hate this layout. We're fighting it. We were told we had a panel and we're all fighting over the podium. So thank you. Push in when you want to talk. But I think that's one of the, yeah, I'll answer the first question. How do you handle assessment for larger numbers? It's a paradigm shift that we have to be looking at. And those of you who may not be familiar, British Columbia's K-12 system is going through quite an iteration and a curriculum change that moving away from grades. So when we look at assessment and we look at grades, 72%, 84%, whatever we're doing, I took a heck of a lot of measurement in my PhD from the gurus who make all the standardized exams. And any teacher-made assessment has a reliability of 0.4, which means throw it out. So I don't believe that figure likely is going to be any different at the post-secondary level. If it's something that is teacher created, we have error. So the equation I usually talk about in other talks I do, it's the observation equals true score plus error. So how are we going to be moving away from that? How are we looking to? And we frankly can do these types of things in courses. We are seeing our scholarships move towards what are you doing, not what your grade is. And so we also have the ability, and I've done it with my own course, submit a course change to pass fail. And when you allow personalization to happen in courses, they actually remain engaged. They're not doing it for the grade, for what you want me to do. So that's a whole other session and talk that we could have, but it's a bit of an emperor's new clothes, what we do for assessment. Assessment should be dialogue, conversation, that feedback, not the quiz that pops up after you watch a video partway through. And I know that we have all the large numbers of the massiveness of the open courses, but would we have the massiveness if all of our smaller unit courses actually opened up and took in, portions? So I'd be curious about that relation of supply and demand.
Sorry, can I just follow up, because that was my question?
Yeah.
I still don't understand how you can scale assessment for the larger numbers. So you have the group in the classroom, you have the people coming in from outside.
Yeah.
Do they pay?
So how many? If we're talking open, they don't pay, right?
But they might pay for assessment.
Well, certainly if they may pay for assessment, but then we start looking at auditing or what have you. When we look at merged modes, they're all credit, like in the multi-access blend, sync, synchronous, hybrid. We're not talking open in those models, except for multi-access is the one that goes out to open. They're all registered. They're just some are online, synchronous, coming in and joining. They're credit and enrolled in the same light, and they may be switching back and forth between modes. But that's where once you actually have that kind of technology-enabled space, it's not that hard to tip over to, well, who else do we bring in? And maybe this isn't looking at bringing in thousands, right? Maybe it's looking at bringing in, and that can be a discretion of the instructor, right? How many do we bring in? I also like the idea of, Heather Ross is here, who does a lot of work in the open textbooks. I actually, when I future trip open textbooks, right now we see a lot of just PDFs, text that people can interact with. But when you look at some of the books that are becoming highly media rich and widget full, and fast forward a number of years, how is that actually going to be different than some of the online course type of media rich spaces that we have? Is a textbook and a online community space going to look that different? I see it as just merging. So would we have a textbook for a course, or could we look at having an open community for a course? And I think that would be a much richer space. And when it comes to diversity as well, those retired principals that were giving some of the quotes in there, it's education in this university. It's
probably 99% white and female. So having some diverse voices contribute to that class discussion would probably be a very good thing. So how do we bring in that diversity? I think that was the point that was being brought up by the instructors. Having more diverse voices would actually help that learning community and also help them better serve their future community, right? Yeah.
So looking for the magic bullet to scale assessment.
The scale assessment, yeah. Well, I know, I fight that though. I'm the one that's pushing back towards, can you though? Just because you want to, just because the system wants that. And we deliver it. We deliver those grades. But if you actually open it up to a measurement researcher to look at the reliability of what we do, it fails the mark.
So what you're saying is if you make it not a grade, and you make it a pass-fail, and link it to what the person did,
Yes,
then that's with scale.
yes.
Okay.
That would be my view.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Comments or questions? Anyone from the room want to talk, or should I go to the screen? Yeah.
I love the idea of having an open classroom. I haven't taught an open course before, but the idea of bringing in diverse voices sounds really great. Although I have a little bit of a concern. I like to be provocative in my classroom, and
Right.
what about asking things that maybe you have a small group of sheltered classroom environment where you can challenge ideas about capitalism or sexism or homophobia, and then you got this open world and somebody from the KKK comes in and now I'm doing damage control.
Yeah.
I just wonder if other people have dealt with that and how you manage that.
Anyone want to talk? I can speak to that. I mean, or you want to speak to that?
Well, I mean,
Let's make it more flat.
we talk about this all the time in the context of our
It not only solves the marking problem, it allows the students to engage the material in a different way when they have to put on their marking hat to mark their peers, and they can see the quality of work that their peers are doing.
To have that discussion, and there's the potential for some educational things. We have a lot of examples of that.
But the students could end up with the wrong.
They could, but it's a web literacy piece. And are we in the business of protecting, or are we in the business of helping learners understand how to navigate those very complex and often uncomfortable environments?
That's a great statement. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, and that's an important piece to bring together. I actually encourage my students, one of my assignments I make now is that they have to have experiences outside of our class community, teacherless sessions, and go forth and participate in them or lead them, create their own, because they have to have discourses, not necessarily as part of our course. And they're usually challenged to do that. Sometimes they seek out face-to-face things, other times they do online things, but we need to actually, I think, look at ways we can get out beyond those sort of confines of these classes. So yeah, but I hear you on that. Any other? What's the next one we have here? How much extra work and resources are required for me to tweak my course design in order to accommodate multi-access and open access students? Oh, that's a good question. The Justice Institute of BC, I know, is looking to make multi-access courses. The instructors who switched to our core course, 6 out of 8 sections were switched to multi-access. The students were wanting to move closer to their practicum placements and what have you, and they wanted to be able to stay in their home communities. So when we looked at them coming in, it was hand-holding. That's what they would describe it. The first time going there, it was just scary, and they wanted to have 100% tech support always around kind of idea. And after that, they kind of, relaxed and realized and reflecting, they said, I don't really think we needed that extent, but we just needed to be supported as we were scared. What happens if something fails? The less teacher-centric you can make that course, I think the better too. So there isn't so much dependent on one size fits all. So how many different ways can you complete a course? I think would be a great way, and I am pushing towards learning plans in this as well. I think it would be better if we looked at not just bringing in people for these fixed experiences, but allowing people to personalize how they see completing the outcomes as opposed to just the outcomes being there. And how many students are doing that already when they don't want to spend, $250 on a textbook they'll figure out what they can read or what they can find online to get the same outcomes that would be in the table of contents of that textbook. So they're personalizing anyway. But that would be how much work and resources. If you look at open access students, we can look at having limits too. Does it have to necessarily mean that, oh, I'm gonna have an open course, I'm gonna have 5,000 people, you know, flooding on me? I don't think that's gonna be happening. I don't think that happens when you look at Brian Jackson's open course. That's an asynchronous kind of way. But someone in the US might be posting a video of them learning guitar and sharing their learning experiences throughout and posting it on their class blog. I don't think he's getting flooded with thousands of people needing his approval on that. So I would, anything you do on anything to do with educational technology is iterate slowly with those little steps. So maybe just switching to one of those approaches where you make a merging of asynchronous with your class, and then look at how you can have one class that is more synchronous merge. Or maybe you have a registration way of people who would be open. Maybe you want 10 open coming in only. So iterate in any way that you can. I mean, it wasn't very hard for us today to, you know, have DS106 have a radio, have a live stream of the audio of today. That just was me clicking a button on an app. It's not hard to create a Google Doc and have a Google stream going out of the slides, and people can connect and create all of this. Thing is, that's kind of a, I don't know, it could be more of a passive way to engage. But when we have social justice issues and people who can't access this, you know, ballroom and this $477 ticket conference, I think whatever we can do to share as much as we can from credit to conference, I think it's really critical. One of the pieces I'm actually talking about right now as well is cyber proxy, which is someone's right to have an online presence in a face-to-face class. And I'm moving towards trying to see how our universities can have cyber proxy policy that it's recognized, and that connects to the whole robot piece. But a robot could be a way to have open learners maybe, and just way to box it in your mind. Open learners are on the robot. So we have many into one. We know where they are. We know how to, you know, like, and they're part of our physical space. You don't have to go and suddenly put video conferencing equipment in every room on a campus, which is not going to happen. But those kinds of things actually, I think, if we have network code and we have those robots that can be, I mean, I think the cost is really limited. So that's more of the multi-access, not to open, but multi-access only. But it could be used for the open access as well, and in a way that you can contain it. Any other comments or questions?
There's a big one at the bottom there if you scroll down.
Whoa, so which one? The I feel that?
I feel, yeah.
I feel that there is a benefit to rootedness in a particular location, in a particular place, at a particular time. The web can create a global community, but is also a disembodied space. In this morning's keynote, there was a talk about how action should be local, state level, when it comes to climate change. If we ask students to engage in global problems and interact with people all over the world, we need to also encourage them to be rooted in the local community, to take action, yes, and live out social justice. One of the things that when we had our multi-access cohort, students all across the province, I tried to accept people in based on pods. So we could at least have little global pods, not global, provincial pods, where they could have their own, not be isolated, but their own ways of gathering together, mini cohorts. So does that kind of thing have to be, do we have to design our higher education the same kind of way all the time? One cohort per class, one size? Could we look at changing how we do these kinds of things? When we have registration, could we not have another section for open learners to mirror and have that kind of limits that we have as well? It took a little bit of time for us to do merging modes in our banner system at UVic, but we looked at it and we just had to do a cross listing. So online section and a face-to-face section, and they slotted them together and linked the two courses. So finding ways that we can work with, and this is the I hate technology, our banner systems and those types of ways to enroll. I think we need to look at how do we bring in and put caps. It could be instructor choice. How many open would you like to have come in? And how do we do an authentication piece for that? Those are, you know, real legit people that want to learn. So I think we can go there. We just need to have the will. So it's like a Jane Austen quote, you know, I think Business is nothing where there is a will. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments?
One of the quotes of the principles that you spoke to really spoke to me about teaching as a game where you want to share.
Yeah.
And so that really spoke to me because where I work, there's been a recent conversation about well, senior leadership actually calling students our clients. Right? And so it's this, that quote really spoke to me because it's about like that's the entryway into an open sharing kind of mindset. Because really the technology is really not the problem, right? It's just that changing mindset.
Yeah. And it's asking those questions and getting them to even consider about open. And I mean, comes back to how we set up our infrastructure and our policies and the way we do things on a campus, because those retired principals, right, enter into a higher ed setting. Okay, I'm going to teach a course. All right, here's your ID number. All right, here's where you go to create a Moodle login. All right, here's your class. And it's just, that's the way it is. So if we continue to provide that just box to go into, turn left, and you've got your nice closed environment without having ways to, would you like to have open? This is our menu. And what would you like to do? Can we support you? What's your philosophy? I'm a little frustrated. I've taught open online since 1998 out of the University of Alberta. And that's a long time ago. That was open. So it's one of the things that I think came out of that time. We're doing an OpenEd curation project too, talking to the pioneers of open. If you ask them, why were you doing open back then? What was the reason? It's very different climate that's out there right now. It's very LMS-y, and it's a loss leader and the clients, and how do we get more people in to maybe want to register and increase our numbers? It's not the same kind of values that the original OpenEd pioneers had, or even when you look at some of the educators, the retired principals, like I said, it's about, no, this is a good thing. We do it because why not? And if we look at everyone up in arms about open access research, the idea there, well, this is terrible. It's, funded by taxpayers. It should be open. Well, teaching in post-secondary is funded by taxpayers. So how do we create teaching that's open? And not just the OERs, but some of the experiences and the communities and the collaborations. So I think we need to be more experimental and exploratory on how do we do that for every single section that we have in little ways that instructors can own that. Right here in the number there.
Can you talk about some of the techniques you use to bridge, I would say, synchronous versus asynchronous participation? So let's say people can only make it there physically, they can't make it there in the same time.
Yes.
How do you give them the same learning experience that those people who have?
In my opinion, synchronous is really important. That said, I don't believe that they need to be synchronous with me in the class time that I pick or I'm given to. So, and this comes back to the teacherless sessions. I had an experience with one class where I was on and I was doing the prompting and trying to get the discussion out. It was video based, and then I stepped away to do something. And so I just muted my mic. I'll be back, sorry, 1 second interruption. And the conversation just erupted and everyone was talking and it was rich and beautiful. And I stood out of the line of camera and I listened, and this was great. It was all on topic. It was natural. And I realized, that's just fantastic. And I came back in thinking I'm going to participate in this really rich conversation. Right? Defer to the prof again.
Right.
And so I tried to do the fishing out, and I'm a very approachable, non-scary, I think, prof. So that was interesting to me. And after that, I realized I think they need to have teacherless sessions. And it could be they run their own. I make it the assignments. They have to document it somehow, blog about it, all those kinds of things, make it happen. And it can be in their own time zone. It can be with somebody else. And the people they can connect to, it's so easy. So some of them have tweeted at an author out of Wired magazine to actually join a session. And the answer is yes. Great. They had a class with a Wired magazine
you know, expert, if you want to use that word, and then learned about it, excited because they owned it and shared it back with the class via blog posts or archives or whatever the permissions were. And this comes to do they have to learn from me? So it comes to a bit of losing your ego too, right? So I think some mixing of
You
those.
set some expectations for them to go off and
Yeah.
then come back. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Just to add to that, it's part of the affordance of the tool. One of those tools that we looked at in one of the slides are heavily controlled. Only the instructor can set up a session. The time is set, whatnot. But more and more, the browser is the way to connect synchronously. And with WebRTC and all these protocols coming online, within our research group, we have meetings without you, Valerie. You know this, but I'll just make it clear. We can just spin up a room and have a conversation when we need to. And it's that community that can be just brought together at any moment when needed.
That's great.
Just realized we have like 1 minute left. You're going to be our last comment from UBC.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking, it seems to me that our IT departments in higher ed are becoming much more conservative and likely for very good reason. But, you know, there may be something there about hindering open, for example, open authentication is a huge barrier.
Yeah.
And it's not because we don't have willing partners in the community and all over to work with us on initiatives, but authentication.
We need, I mean, we had a master's program at U of A called School Technology Liaison Program. And it was for the educators to learn how to tell the tech people, no, back off, I want this for my teaching. Because too often they will control what's happening for what's easier, safer, whatever, less updates, something, you know, and so we need the same kind of thing in higher ed. I'm chair of the Collaborative Technologies Working Group in BCNet here, which is our CIO's systems, and it's fascinating. We've got the ed tech community that's the teacher oriented. We need a school technology liaison program for our two worlds, because we need more of a, no, we need this, you make it so we build it, as an approach. But I know we're at time. I'm happy to hang around and have more conversations. Thanks for sitting around for the last 30 minutes. I wanted to be able to make sure we had some conversation time, because again, that's what part of the value of having the teacherless sessions. So thank you for contributing online as well, and for anyone who joined in on Google Hangouts or for listening on DS 106 radio. Thank you.